What are we whispering about?
They are immensely kind and deeply wise. And they began speaking through me in perfect rhyme. And so what I started doing was by then I had a digital recorder, because I would take my digital recorder into the forest with me just in case something came through. It's just easy to just hit record, put it on the pillow, and just leave it on for the next 3 or 4 hours. And whenever I spoke, it would be in this perfect rhyme, and there'd be different ones that would speak through me. And so the first time that happened, I got out of that journey and I was shocked and I was humbled.
In the air, by the sea, from the land, and within you and me. Fairies are whispering. Have you been coloured, confused, completely captivated, and craving clarity? This is Claire Casely, and I am a fairy whisperer. To catch a whisper, you have to listen closely. Listen with me. Hello and welcome. How are you?
I have a guest I'm really excited to speak with, Shonagh, who is an amazing writer. She's a poet, she's a teacher, and she connects with the other world of fairies through her connection with mushrooms and so much more.
A reminder that if you want to appear on the podcast to talk about a fairy experience or about your connection with fairies, you can email the show clairefairywhisperer@gmail.com.
Welcome, Shonagh.
Oh, thank you, Claire, so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast, Shonagh.
For the past almost 15 years, I have counseled people. So I do actually most of that kind of thing today. So I do private sessions with people. It's counseling, it's mentoring. And my work is very in-depth, deep, psychospiritual work. And I am just fascinated and in awe of the psyche and its mystery and the human story. And so that's the work of my heart, I would say. And for the past almost 10 years now, I have been hosting one-on-one retreats in my home. And it sounds odd, but it's actually very traditional. So I always say that the medicine man or medicine woman didn't have a clinic or an office, right? They had a household. And you would come and you would get your teachings and your medicines and your training, whatever you were looking for. And so what this is my client arrives on a Sunday, they leave Friday morning. And so it's deep one-on-one. It's all about them. And again, it's this psychospiritual work. I'm very good at pattern recognition, so I can cut to the chase very quickly. I'm also very psychic. And my work is Jungian inspired. And I like that he worked with tarot, worked with each, he understood those systems, and I incorporate those as well. And then they also in this work have, shall we say, an opportunity to explore expansive states of consciousness. And I'll just leave it at that. And so that is the work that I do today. And then I teach, and also I am a writer. And so I have 3 books published, and this latest one is titled Poetic Whispers from the Cauldron of the Other World. And so I have been working and apprenticing myself to the mushroom teachers, magic mushrooms, for 13 years now. And up to that point, I started at 48. At the age of 40, I began working with really superb teachers. And so my main teacher was Dr. Brewjoy, who was a Johns Hopkins trained MD, who walked away from all of that to teach. And he was very Jungian. He was my introduction to Jung, and I read everything I possibly could by that man. And I'm very much an autodidact. I'm self-taught, and I love to learn, and I love to research and read, and that's what I do for fun. So Brew just opened my whole world, and that's how I began doing sessions with people. It just sort of happened organically. And at the age of 48, I found my way to the mushroom. But I will say that I don't drink alcohol. I don't take medications. I don't smoke pot. I have this I'm super athletic and all of that, keep myself very healthy. So for me, this wasn't, in other words, this wasn't recreational. It wasn't like, oh, okay, let's do a drug. This was very shamanic. I was out in the forest in a beautiful part of Washington State, the rainforest up there. It was nighttime. I was with a trusted friend who knew what he was doing. I sure didn't. But we both had a lot of training, and I'm very close to the spirit world. We'll go into a wee bit of background on that in a moment. But so I had my first mushroom journey, and it absolutely blew my mind. It was extraordinary. The earth spoke to me. I saw Pan. We were in the forest. I couldn't have been in a better location outside. So beautiful. And that happened. I went home. I wrote about it. And the following month, I wanted to go back and have that experience again. And what happened was unplanned. I ended up having 12 months in a row of monthly mushroom journeys. And midway through, I realized these are teaching spirits. I'm going to apprentice myself. Because after my first experience, I realized this is a portal. And so again, you're not going to see me at festivals or Burning Man or anything like that. To me, this was deeply spiritual and very, very ancient. And what happened to me was I connected with the nature spirits, and as well, at some point, the fairy. And my friend swears that happened because at some point I did an awful lot of mushrooms at night in the forest with him, and I began reciting this crazy poem called Modern Major General at the top of my lungs on a lot of mushrooms. It was very funny. And he said, that's when they found you. That's when they found you. Because, of course, they have such a sense of humor, the fairies. So in any case, that led to a book writing about that experience called Love and Spirit Medicine. And then I would speak at different conferences here and there and do podcast interviews. So essentially, I put myself out there as what I call an older woman's voice for the reverent use of this medicine, but also to understand that nature is inspirited, that spirit is in everything. And so some would call that animist, right? And I know, I don't believe this, long past belief that spirit is in everything. Now, I'll quickly say, as a child, I was raised Irish Catholic. I had an Irish grandmother, and she was, like many Irish, a master storyteller. And we were little children, and she would speak very quietly, and she would tell us fairy stories. And we were she had our ears. She was just amazing. And so I realized, looking back, like, that was really my opening into that world. And then as a child, I would go to the public library. I was in Toronto, Canada. I'm Canadian. And I found Andrew Lang's books of fairy tales, the Red Fairy book, the Blue Fairy book, and on and on. And I would get them. They were hardcover, and I would get one a week, and I would just pour over, read the whole thing cover to cover, and the imagery just enchanted me. And then I would look for the fairy in my garden. And sorry, that's my kitty cat. He's very talkative. And so I was also, as a child, I was clairsentient. So I could feel energies very palpably. And I was also claircognizant. So I would get knowings. I would just know things, but I didn't know what to call that. I was a kid. And so I called it confirmations. That was the strongest word I could think of. But I would know when things were going to happen. And I knew also we were going to move to the States. And there was no discussion of that, but I knew, and that happened about a year later. So, I sort of had a natural proclivity anyway to all of this. I also had a very treasured friendship with a tree, this beautiful tree that grew in front of our house. And there was a branch I could easily climb up to that branch, and I would just sit in that tree. I would sit for a long time in silence. And that tree would speak to me, but it wasn't in English. It was all in impressions. So yeah, I was kind of a magical child, also very precocious and very naughty. And that continued into my adolescence and beyond. And it really wasn't until I hit 40 when my marriage to the father of my two daughters fell apart, and I found myself a single mother, which I never thought would be the case. And that was what I call the midlife face slap. And it caused me to question everything. And then that began this deep exploration throughout my 40s, and working with really superb teachers and just digging much deeper. And it really put me on my path, my dharma, which is to work with people, to help them to go, very deeply into what is ailing them, what is the origination point of that issue with them, and also to inspire and to empower. And so I've just been doing that ever since, but in kind of an unusual way, right? I didn't do the university route, and I actually prefer to be kind of on the edges of the mainstream, if you will. I like the fringe. I'm much more comfortable here, and I never fit into a peg anyway my whole life. So very happy kind of in this place. So that's a very long-winded answer, Claire, but there you are.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's fascinating listening to your connection through your grandmother. I'm just wondering if you can remember any of her stories.
Well, one in particular, and she would frighten us with this, was of the banshee. And so the banshee, of course, is the wailing or keening fairy, and there would be families that would have kind of a banshee spirit, and it would wail and to announce the death of a family member. So I so wish that could have been recorded, all her stories. This is the thing, right? Thank goodness that we have the folklorists who have, like Catherine Briggs, I have all her books, who have recorded so much, because, this was just taken for granted. It's just like, oh yeah, my grandma, she's a good storyteller. But those banshee stories were intense. And that's the thing too I love about the way they would tell stories. It wasn't, homogenized, or, they just told these crazy stories to children, but it, really fueled the imagination. And for me, I see that it really initiated me into my own exploration of that.
I just released an episode with my guest Billy, who was talking about banshees. So coincidentally, he was talking about how the banshees follow families, and they followed many families to America. Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up.
I'm going to listen. I'm going to definitely check that out, Claire.
Let's move on to your stepping into this other world, these experiences with the mushrooms. Could you just describe one of your first encounters with the Fae?
So I am a medium, and spirits come through me, but I don't like work as a medium. But certainly when I do the mushroom, they speak through me, and this has been going on for a number of years. So that very first year where I was working monthly was like a kind of training, but also it was a year where I ended up, after 5 or 6 months, entering into a dark night of the soul, all of which was necessary. So it was this very essential, like, you're going to look at yourself. At the same time, different spirits were coming in, and I wasn't sort of speaking, they were more making sort of noises. A lot of birds would come through that first year. So I was having these experiences of that level of connection with these otherworldly beings. And then at the same time, looking at my unhealed stuff, looking at my patterns, and just having to really, explore that and get settled with different things that happened, and then to be able to move forward. And so I see that as very preparatory for the work that I am now doing today, right? I really had to do my own work. And of course that continues. But in any case, what started to happen was I would run every day in the woods, and I was living in Redmond, Washington at the time. And I noticed, first of all, on these runs, that I could feel the energy of the forest in a way that I just hadn't noticed before. So what I have realized is that these mushrooms will, they can kind of exacerbate your proclivities, shall we say. So I was naturally clairsentient and sort of naturally psychic anyway. And I really, really noticed this with the forest. And then the trees. I started getting poetic messages from the trees on my runs. Not every single run, but the first time it happened, it was so pronounced. And I started sort of repeating what was said over and over until I got to my car, and then I got home. And then when I went to write it down, the whole thing just poured through. And so that was the first message from the fairy, if you will, these forest spirits. And that continued. And what is so interesting is, all right, so I had that first year, every single month I went in. And then the second year, I went in fairly frequently, but certainly not every single month. And then at some point I started the retreats, and then I got very, very busy with the retreats, and I realized, okay, this has got to slow way down. So I would go in twice a year. And I continue that today. I just go in twice a year. But what would happen on these mushroom journeys, I would take the mushroom, I'd be always lying down. I was following the instruction of a man who died in 2000, but he was quite a voice for the mushrooms. His name was Terrence McKenna, and he advocated taking 5 dried grams, which is an awful lot, and I don't advocate that, but that's what I was doing. Lying down, eyes closed, in silent darkness. And I will try to remember to kind of come back to this later when I talk about my book, because in my book I talk about the training of the seer poets of Ireland, and their training was done in darkness. And so anyway, that is what I would do. And what would happen is that energy would come from the base of my spine, up my spine. My hands would go into spontaneous mudras. My back would arch, and strange sounds would come through me. And what came to me was this is the fairy. And so it wasn't any kind of language. It was just these they're beautiful lyrical sounds that I can't make on my own, nor would I ever try. In any case, then I would feel the presence, and I will tell you, I've always just barely seen them in my mind's eye because I'm not clairvoyant, but I am clairsentient. I can feel them because everything is frequency. And they are tall and shimmering. They're not these little Tinkerbells. No, no, no. And they're also deeply wise. And there's different groups of them, as of course you well know, right? And there are some you leave well enough alone. You don't go there. They don't want anything to do with us. And then there are others that are, of course, very amenable and have, for God knows how long, interacted with humanity. And so I'm just telling you, they are immensely kind and deeply wise. And they began speaking through me in perfect rhyme. And so what I started doing was by then I had a digital recorder, because I would take my digital recorder into the forest with me just in case something came through. It's just easy to just hit record, put it on the pillow, and just leave it on for the next 3 or 4 hours. And whenever I spoke, it would be in this perfect rhyme, and there'd be different ones that would speak through me. And so the first time that happened, I got out of that journey, and I was shocked, and I was humbled. And one of the lines they said to me later during the mushroom journey, they said, "You wonder why we talk to you, daughter, you doubt your own value." And because indeed, I just would think, my goodness, how's this possible? And so what I would do the following day is I would listen, I would transcribe everything that came through. And I just have held on to these poetic transmissions for all these years. And I did do a little ebook on this. But that was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And then I just kind of put that aside. And it wasn't until recently that my publisher had said, "Listen, you've got that other book, Poetic Whispers, but you've got all these years of poetry. Why don't you work with that book and add more to it?" And so I thought, all right, that's a really good idea. And that launched me into a deeper exploration into the folklore of the fairy in Scotland, Ireland, and also the training of the seer poets of old Ireland. And so it was an amazing experience for me. And then I'd put it in chapters and put this poetry throughout the book. Now, it's funny because I think of this book, I'm always like a little bit hesitant with it, because we are in such an age of technology, and it's really intense. It's really superficial. It's an absolute mess everywhere, right? I mean, I do say we're circling the toilet as a civilization all around the world, right? I mean, this is the death of an era, and then, something new will begin, of course. But I just don't think it's very pretty right now. And so I just think, my goodness, this book could not be like, is this even the right time for something like this? It couldn't be more removed, right, from kind of where people's mindsets are. And yet I'm so grateful for people like yourself, Claire, and of course others, and also my retreat clients, because I would read them poetry here and there, and they were really the ones who, they were just so touched by what they were hearing and saying, "My God, you've got to bring that outward, Shonagh. This is beautiful." And so I know there are people who are open to this and touched by this, and I actually think that this is I think it's actually really important for us because the reason why we're in such a mess. Well, I had one experience on the mushroom where I was speaking with the fairy queen. And I go in there often to those realms, kind of wringing my hands. And I'm like, you guys, it's a mess. We need your help. And I was talking to her about just how lost everyone is. And her answer was so clear and so concise. And she said, the consequence when one forgets. And that is the piece, right? I've been doing a lot of reading of these Renaissance philosophers of late, Renaissance and medieval, and they were calling back the wisdom out of Greece of these ancients, and it was all about the individual, but the individual developing themselves in such a way, right, that they're holding the virtues, the knowledge, the wisdom, and it was this moral philosophy, and that was a golden era, and so I understood she was speaking to this, and this connection, this deep connection and appreciation of the natural world, and also an understanding that there's the beauty of what you see, and then there is the spirit of what you see, and that's what has been forgotten by the great majority. Obviously, there are a number of people, thank goodness, who still hold to that and know that to be true and have their kind of devotional experiences in that way.
Wow, I was getting chills when you were talking because I really recently, that is my feeling as well. Or a lot of us are feeling the same, that this is a time of remembering. And I really feel that the fairies, part of the reason that they're reaching out for us, or the main reason that they're reaching out to us, is to help us to remember this wisdom and who we really are and why we're here. Yeah, so I was getting chills when you were sharing the message from the fairy queen. It's the fairy queen that gave you that message, wasn't it?
Yes.
Wow. I truly believe that many people I've spoken to, fairies are coming forward to remind us of these old ways, of why we're here, connection with nature. And there was something else I wanted to pick up on. Oh yes, your poetry. I hear what you're saying about the chaos that's going on in the world and bringing this creativity forward at this time. And I know I question what I'm doing sometimes. I think, so why am I on this path? And then when I bring my creativity forward in whatever form it is, whether it's this podcast or artwork or writing, then I get some kind of response from someone that says, thank you for that. So people do need to receive our work. And on that note, I'd love to hear one of your poets. Do you have one to share?
I do. All right. So I will say also, that this is not about escapism either, because these beautiful beings have taught me so much over the years. And I'll quickly say the first 2 to 3 years of working with the mushrooms, what they would say to me, whether I was on a mushroom journey or not, they'd come into my head and say, get your mind right, dear. Get your mind right. Because I have been plagued through my life with chronic worry and at times crippling self-doubt. Now, I will quickly say also, I study astrology just for my own self, and I'm a Virgo rising, and I did discover in my studies that Virgos are chronic worriers. And that actually, I was like, thank you. That explains that. Okay, I will continue to work with this. But, I had to work with all that. And then they started teaching me how to use my mind. So also in a little bit, I will share with you they started teaching me magic, but magic through the power of the mind, because you can see, of course, in what's playing out in the greater world that people's minds have been completely overtaken, and it happens from a very young age, and that's by design. And so, you know, they were saying, yeah, you got to get that mind right, dear, and stop going into worst case scenario and all that negativity, you know, and really learn how to utilize that, because you're creating a field, a distortion field, when you go into those places, because like I said earlier, everything's frequency. So anyway, this was back in 2016, and it was the winter solstice, and both my girls were away. They were with their father. I never ever would journey when my daughters were around. Oh my God. No way. It was always an empty house on my own. And I got called to go in, and I was with the fairy and the elfin queen, I called her. And so I call this winter solstice mushroom journey. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's very long, but it's still going to be long. But it's just so beautiful. And I'll tell you also, I was hesitant. I always, before I take the mushroom, because it takes a lot out of you, right? It does a number on your nervous system. Like, it can be intense. I'm always just like, oh boy, here we go. So they always tease me every single time. Like, it's so hard to get you out, because it is. I'm like a home person. I like to be with my books. It's hard to get me out of that house. So they tease me about this here. All right. This is what they said. We are a small conglomeration, members of the fairy nation. We would like to sit with you and offer up our point of view. We have much to say, it's true. We will ensure that you'll construe our message to you at this hour. To you, dear one, we will shower. Using words we like to play, it's the nature of the fae. Tonight you'll play with we the fae. We'll make your worries go away. Invite us in so we can stay a while and with our good friend play. Magic we will make tonight, with you hidden out of sight, in your bedroom chamber dark. Listen, and then you will hark. In we come through golden spine, taking you to place divine. Hidden deep inside your mind, we will show you how to find the hidden door. We'll open wide, we'll all together step inside. This will be a pleasant ride as we speak to you inside. Hard to get you out to play. You would far prefer to stay all alone with those sad thoughts. We do not like to see you caught in that web of frequency. We are here to rest you free. Trust us, daughter, this the night, the perfect evening for a flight. The sky is clear, the weather sure. Your ship that grows in cow manure will take you far tonight, dear one. You a daughter of the sun. You don't need to eat that much, just enough so we can touch the beauty place within your heart. This the place we like to start. Luring you with Pan's embrace, he puts a smile onto your face. Do not lose heart, good daughter wise. We do hear your worried cries. Remember, we're a frequency, a current that you cannot see, a separate world where wise ones we extend our hand to help you free yourself from mental prisons there. We seek to make you quite aware that there is far more here for you. We'll help you with all that you do. Ancient shining ones did walk on this green earth. We had our flock. Feel the cauldron in heart center, placed thereby we, your ancient mentors. No, we are not kin by blood. We showed up after the flood. We cast a magic overlay upon the land on which we lay, upon the land, so we the fae would have a place where we could stay, knowing there would come the day when dark-winged ones would come to slay the shining ones you call the fae. Yes, dear, we're very much alive, and we are sharpening the knives of minds like yours, preparing you to walk through veils to join a few old friends who've been watching you while you create that cauldron's brew. And then I said, Elfin queen, fair lady there, I am trying not to stare. And she said, you've already 3 books done, now get ready for some fun. 3 more coming soon to you, Muse's gift you are imbued. Priestesses fair were once everywhere, so many climbed the ancient stairs. Now so few who come. Those who do seek respite from the stench of pain that lives here now. They have defiled the sacred cow. We imbue the ones with ears. We will gently help you steer your ship to waters with skies clear, away from those dark ones you fear. They really cannot hurt you, dear. The more you learn of sovereignty, the better off that you will be. That is when you will be free. And the many that you see, caught in net, they are not free. Yes, they suffer terribly. You do your best to help them free, to help them see. And if they're lucky, hopefully, they'll catch the drift and sail to seas that won't produce the storms and gales, the crying, moaning, and the wails. The only wails you'll likely hear will be the ones that swim quite near our ships, for they are curious, for we don't cause injurious effects upon their sacred waters. This a place where sons and daughters, mothers, fathers, and the old live in peace, and with hearts bold they share the light within their soul. This a safe place to behold, not a dream, dear, it can be, if you open eyes to see. We are playing words with thee, hoping your good mind will free itself from all those thoughts that bind.
I'm so moved by that. That's amazing, Shonagh.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and it was like listening to a spell.
Mm.
The resonance of the words and the flow. I received messages from fairies in rhyme.
You do?
Yeah, I do. That's the way I hear them. On my Instagram from a few years ago, 4 years ago, I'd take a beautiful photo of nature and I'd write a few lines of rhyme, chant through whilst I was in that place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's amazing, these connections between guests. Again, speaking to Billy, he lives in Ireland, and he was talking about hearing a woman outside his window who wasn't a physical woman. He looked out of his blind, he could see this woman who was talking to this dark figure, but she was speaking in Welsh, in rhyme. So she was speaking, and the way that you read that poem gave me chills, because you were reading it in the exact same way that he described this woman was talking. So she was talking in rhyme, and her voice was going up and down, up and down.
Mm.
So thank you for sharing that. That was just so powerful.
Yeah, they speak through poetry. In fact, I remember reading in my research on the folklore, I believe it was Lady Gregory who said this, who was Oscar Wilde's mother, and she collected a lot of stories from the people around the turn of the century, I believe. But she said that it was understood by people that poetry and music are gifts from the fairy. So, and I believe Catherine Briggs also talked about that. So, yeah. Yeah. And also I'll quickly say, the mushroom is, I think of it as a kind of crossroads or meeting place where you can go in and there's all manner of different beings you can meet. I think it's very interesting that we have all these Victorian images by the artists of that time of It's a different mushroom. It's not the psilocybin mushroom that I work with, but it's the Amanita muscaria, the red and white mushroom. Always shown with fairies and elves. Always, always. Which I always thought, oh, that's very interesting. But I'll read a quick quote by Caitlin Matthews, who is really like the godmother of the just this wealth of occulted history of the Celts and the Arthurian piece. I mean, she's just amazing. And this this is from her book Celtic Visions, and I use this quote in my book at the beginning of one of my chapters. She wrote, "The dialogue between our world and the other takes place at the thresholds and crossing places of both realms, at notable land features such as springs, mountains, or rivers, or it can happen in dreams, vision, and meditation when the seer attunes the vision of both realms, wherein we meet the fairy teachers of the seership traditions. As we enter deeply into these patterns and images, they yield their truth."
I love that.
Caitlin and John Matthews they're just national treasures. And they have written, I think, a good 200 books between the two of them. And they're scholars. They also speak Gaelic. They can go into these old manuscripts and translate. It's just wonderful. And so they put forth so much fantastic information that I think we otherwise would not have.
Yes, there's so many amazing people out there, isn't there? But I've researched, I've been writing about pixies and researching them. It's a type of fairy in the southwest of England. And I'm so thankful to the folklorists from Victorian times who recorded these stories about fairies and local traditions from local people, the people that went out into the field and spoke to these people and recorded their wonderful tales. And this tradition continues, isn't it? I'm doing that in my way, you're doing that in your own way, gathering this wisdom together.
There's that old adage, it says, for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. That's very old. And so, of course, it indicates, look, the majority of people, they're doing their thing. Then you get these certain people, they've got the eyes to see and ears to hear. And so they can listen beneath the surface story, beneath the surface picture, and they're just naturally connecting to these deeper layers. And it doesn't matter kind of what's playing out in the greater world, because I don't think this ever goes away. We're talking about spirits of the land, very, very, very old. And we've just, since the quote unquote enlightenment, which I'm not so sure that's the right word to use, but in any case, when things got very rational and materialist and away from the so-called superstition, right? We've been steered into this very commercial kind of reality. But it doesn't mean magic and these otherworldly beings left us. No, we got steered away, but it's all there waiting for us, and people are going to experience it in different ways because we're unique. But it's there for us.
Yes, they never went away. It was we that abandoned them.
Right.
We're the ones that turned our backs on them.
Yeah.
The distractions of modern life, really. Like mobile phones, all of those things that are illusionary, and they bring us back to what really matters. You mentioned teaching magic, Shonagh.
Yes.
Is that something you could share with us?
Sure.
Teaching magic and
And my book, Poetic Whispers from the Cauldron of the Otherworld, I realized, when I read through it, I'm like, this is a magical manual. It goes into, with the history of the fairy, and then these poetic transmissions are interspersed. And then I go into some of my personal story. And so yes, they start teaching me how to use my mind. But of course, the first thing you have to do is kind of take the trash out, right? So you've got some housekeeping to do, all of us, right? In the way we think. And that's all just learned stuff, and it just ends up being sort of thought form. But we also create with our thoughts. There's a piece of writing I always recommend clients and students read, and it was written in 1905 by James Allen. It's called As a Man Thinketh. And he was riffing off a line in the Bible that says, I think, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. James, that one really, I guess, hit James hard because he couldn't stop thinking about it. And he realized, my goodness, the mind really is like a garden, and it must put forth. It can't not. So I can tend it and keep it weeded and be careful of what I put in there, or just let the whole thing go to weed, right? And then of course back to these philosophers and the Platonists, and it was about developing the self, So in any case, yeah. So I had cleanup to do, and then in terms of the magic, what happened? I just think this is so interesting, the timing of all of this. I was living in Redmond, Washington in 2016. It came to me psychically. It said when my youngest daughter, Serena, was to graduate in 2019, it said, when she graduates, you're graduating, you are to leave the Seattle area and you are to move East Coast rural. And that's all it told me. And I was just kind of getting going with my retreats. And before that, I would kind of work here and there for myself, but I've never been like this power woman who's, made all this money, was married. I raised my girlies, and so I was doing these retreats. I was finally starting to actually make, a living, some semblance of a living. And I thought, okay, all right, actually to backtrack, where I was living at that time was this cottage on a horse farm. So actually this was the first lesson that they taught me. So I shared the house with, after my father of my daughters and I split up, about a year later, I met a wonderful guy. We ended up getting married, and he was working with Brew, who became my teacher. So he opened just this whole world up to me. I'm so grateful to him. And so I spent my 40s working with these teachers. And then again, at 48, came to the mushroom. And on our property, we had this small pond, and there was a little island in the center and a bridge to the island. So I would go out there with my screened tent at night at times and do the mushroom just out there in the middle of the water. And then that man and I, we ended up getting divorced amicably, but we shared the house for 2 years. So I decided, because I was living in Redmond and I knew there were horse farms there, and I said, I didn't want to just get any old place. And I had 2 girls. I said, I want a cottage on a horse farm, nestled in trees near my girls' school. And so they went to this school's little private schools on 70 acres, and it was lovely. And so it wasn't like I could just move away. That was their school. And I began talking to Pan, and who is kind of Lord of the Forest, and all of these beings who are working with me and kind of coaching me, if you will, that it's how you speak. Be very, very careful how you speak. Be careful who you speak to, and hold this vision in your mind. And I worked with the spirits of the trees, and I said, please send this message through your roots. I know there is a cottage on a horse farm around here. I know someone's got a rental. I just know. And it took 2 years. And at the end of that, and also I didn't have any money. I wasn't making, I was just trying to I was doing sessions here and there, but not enough to really make much a living. And also Redmond's expensive. And I knew the rent would be probably $2,000 a month, because I would need, a 2 or 3 bedroom little place. And then usually when you rent, you have to do first month, last month, and then security. That's probably another month. So I was like, God, I'm going to need $5,000. My God, how are we going to do this? But in my mind, they kept saying, no, just don't worry about the how. Just keep calling and feeding that vision of what you want. So I would do that. And I would always say, I'm getting a cottage on a horse farm, nestled in trees near my girls' school. And so towards the end of that 2 years, I remember my ex-husband at the time, God bless him, said, so, hey, so is there a backup plan if this cottage on a horse farm doesn't come through? And I remember saying, look, I know it sounds crazy, but it's my turn to be the exception to the rule. And probably a week or so later, I used to host these full moon ceremonies, and I didn't even know this woman well, but I had said to people, look, I'm looking for this place. If you know of something on a horse farm, I'm looking for a rental. She calls me and says, hey, so like out of the blue, are you going to need some dough, some money for this place? And I was like, yeah. And she said, okay, I was thinking, I want to lend you $5,000 and you can just, pay me monthly, whatever, we'll figure it out. And I was like, oh, okay. And she said, all right, let's meet for a cup of tea this week and we'll do it. And we did. And so now I had $5,000. And then a few days later, a good friend of mine called and said, hey, I just looked at this adorable cottage. It's on a horse farm. It's right next to your girls' school. And it would be perfect for you guys. It's not going to work for me. And she said, and the landlady's really nice. And so that was a Friday, and I was actually going to be teaching a group of women all weekend. I didn't even call her till Sunday, which by then, God knows who was ahead of me with their, whatever, their big paychecks and their everything that you would need to get a place like that. So I called her and she said, well, come on by tomorrow morning. And my girls had just gotten out of school. So I brought my daughters with me. And we meet this woman, and I could tell she really liked my girls. And then at some point, she asked the girls, where do you go to school? And they said, right next door. And she said, both my daughters graduated from that school. So then I was like, oh my God, we're in. And then the other thing she said to me, we were talking kind of rent and whatnot. And if I said to you, let me talk to my finance person on that, I'll get back to you. I wouldn't say their name, who cares? But she said, let me talk to my finance person, Pan, and I'll get back to you. And I had to, I said, I'm sorry, did you say Pan with an N or did you say Pam, like with an M? And she said, no, Pan, like P-A-N. And I was like, okay, thank you. So needless to say, I got that after 2 years of really working my mind. And also then, my ex-husband, the father of my girls, said he would help with rent. I mean, like the whole thing came together beautifully, and I found myself on a cottage on a horse farm nestled in trees right next to my girls' school, and we lived there for 5 years. And so a couple years later in 2016, so when I got that message, I said, okay, you know what? I want a farmhouse. I want an 1800s farmhouse on a minimum of 3 acres for sale by owner for under $200,000 within an hour from the airport, because by then, I had retreat clients who would fly in from different places, so it didn't really matter where I lived as long as it was beautiful. And then I said, and I want a barn in the back, and I want my girls have to love it. And so that was a tall order even back then. It's an impossible order, maybe not today, but in any case, so I would say that over and over, and I looked to different areas because I wasn't told where. And then at some point, I found this place, and it was the August of 2018. Okay, so what was happening, all right, was I was getting, and this started in 2018 when I was really, really looking. Every month, the fairy, I call them, the she, because you know what, this is what they say. They call themselves the shining ones, you call the she. And I'll tell you actually a quick story, digress for a second. Because for a few years after that, I was always like, so are they the shining ones I call the she, but they're not really the she, they're the shining ones, or are they the shining, like I wasn't sure. And just maybe a couple of years ago, I had a woman from Ireland, a retreat client, and we were sitting at my kitchen table, and I was sharing my poetry with her. And then we were talking about the she, and then she leans in and looks at me with a wink in her eye and says, you know where I'm from? We call them the shining ones. Like, wait, what? What did you just say? Oh my God. you just resolved something for me that is amazing. And that is their humor. That is exactly, they love to play, right? They're so playful. And you can tell they're just laughing. And anyway, so that happened. So, all right. So I was getting these poetic transmissions, these extraordinary transmissions, kind of coaching me on using my mind, because I didn't even have any money saved. And I'm talking about, yeah, I'm gonna buy this place. So I'm going to read you something that came through in March of 2018 that I call Genie's Lamp. And in my book, Poetic Whisperers, I tell the story of, how this place came to me, that farmhouse in Vermont. And then after that comes all of the poetic transmissions that were teaching me through the magical, lyrical cadence of poetry how to use my mind.
Fantastic. And after you've read the poem, I'd love to ask some questions about the amazing experience you've just shared, Shonagh. There's so much I want to say about that and ask about that.
Of course.
Yeah. So please read your poem. I'm looking forward to this.
Remember the power within your mind, an ancient spell you now unbind. The negative voices that claim that you can't are losing their might. Their effects will be scant, for you are a being who hails from the kind of folk who can conjure by using the mind. The world as you know it will begin to change. Your mind holds the wand, and it will rearrange. The old programs within you are cast out to sea. Watch them flowing away as you feel yourself free from the bonds of those thoughts that you once felt were real. You access your true nature they tried to steal. Your true nature lives in the temple of mind. It's a genie's lamp hidden, and it's quite the find. See it clear in your consciousness, shining and bright. You've been on a long journey, now land is in sight. It is time now to resume an ancient art bold, where you, the magician, claim this treasure old. It's a wand, it's a genie's lamp, hidden in you. The more you think of it, the more you'll imbue in yourself the old magic you had all along. Hold this vision within you and make your mind strong. An old curse you are breaking, now cast your good spell. Use the power of thinking to break out of hell. See the genie's lamp glowing inside of your mind. Think of what you would like, and then easily bind to the vision, the feeling, the outcome you'd like. If you practice enough, it's like riding a bike. Form a friendship with that treasure that's been revealed, an old tool of magicians that's long been concealed. You now hold it, the genie's lamp, a kind of wand. The more that you use it, the more you'll grow fond of its power to take you where you want to go. But if you don't use it, then you'll never know what the possible futures before you might hold. That old saying that fortune favors the bold is a truism known throughout time for good reason. It's courage and action that changes the season. Rise to the occasion and play with this tool. You've officially entered a new kind of school where the power of imagination is taught. You have opened the door to a new kind of thought. Call the genie within you and share the details. Be clear with your vision and what it entails. Feel the presence of this ancient tutor and friend who will walk with you all the way up to the end.
It's just amazing. I'm just really blown away by your words. They're so powerful. Feel like they come from the Fae. They really feel like they come from another place.
Thank you. I don't write like that, like my normal writing. And if I try to write like a poem, I kind of suck. Like it doesn't sound like that. If I try to make it happen, it does not.
No, well, when listening to you throughout this conversation, especially when we first started, I can tell, because I'm very intuitive, I can tell you're very psychic, and because I have experience of spontaneously channeling information too. So I was feeling in my throat when we started speaking from your energy. I could just sense your energy, just like something wanted to come up through me. And when I was listening to you, so what sort of feedback have people given to you about their writing? Have they felt that, there's something powerful that is stirred within them? Like,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And my good friend on the West Coast, when this first started happening, I would share. And then I remember calling her one day and I was like, yeah, this came through the other night. And I read it to her and she goes, how long did it take you to write that? And I said, I don't know, like 10 minutes, 12 minutes. She's like, okay, do you understand that doesn't just like happen? Like she was trying to say, like, you got to understand this is unique. And anyway, so but my clients who come what I really was struck by was how touched they were, like very touched. And that I would read something and when I was done, you could hear a pin drop. Like people wouldn't respond immediately because they were still in the vibration of it, maybe the feeling that it gave them. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's how I'm feeling. It's the resonance is, it's like I just want to be in it and just be with it. And I'm guessing that's how you were obviously feeling when you were working with the mushrooms, that you were just totally present with them and with those beings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so.
And going back to this amazing manifestation of your home in the woodland, the cottage in the woods on a horse farm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get that. I understand, because I've worked with manifesting through my meditation training that I did and my coaching training that I've done. My wonderful mentor, K-Star, she taught me about manifesting abundance and those skills. The listeners that don't know about this process, could you just break it down for listeners about your process of bringing those wonderful things into your life, your cottage?
Yes. And so first I start with the vision. And that is really important. Obviously, like you have a certain desire. And by the way, I'm not doing this for like expensive cars or whatever. Like I needed a place to live, and so that is what I use this for, like when I really absolutely need that assistance. So I had the vision in my mind, and I really, I make it as clear as possible. Now, I will say also, I see this as a co-creative endeavor, because one thing I've learned over the years is we ultimately don't have the last word. Like we do have to remember our place in the realm, right? Like we're divine beings. I do know this in my heart of hearts, emanating from this beautiful, creative force of just genius, pure genius. And so it's co-creative. Like I'm careful also to just have humility here, as well. And there's different kinds of magic. I'm not into whatever Goetia or, whatever Solomon, whatever. I'm not calling in demons and, trapping them and making them do my will. No, that's not how I roll. And you have to be really careful with that kind of thing anyway. No, I'm working with the power of my mind and these very elegant and eloquent and deeply wise beings who have been instructing me all this time. Okay, I remembered. I'm trying to look it up in my book, but I remembered. So I call my formula vision, focus, and will. And so you have that vision in your mind of what you're trying to create, and then you need to focus. And so that means you have to be very careful who you share your vision with, because there's lots of naysayers out there. Now, something that the she explained to me was, like, we could call it perspective, but they said everything is a spell. One of the things they said to me once is, it's but a spell, dear, and nothing more. And of course, when we're speaking, we're spelling words. We're casting a spell. We don't know that. And they did say to me years ago on a mushroom journey, they said, dear, there is a user's manual for this mind-body complex, which you find yourself. You've not been given it, but some of you are going to figure it out, right? So we don't have the user's manual on, like, really how to use this, at least in this day and age. And so the mind is key. And that genie, I love the idea of it being a genie's lamp. It's that powerful. So the focus, and there's also repetition, and spells are often repeated. So like I did for 2 years, like, yeah, I'm going to get a cottage on a horse farm nestled in trees near my girls' school. And that's exactly what I ended up with. And the next story is even more incredible. And I'll maybe share that one as well, with a house in Vermont. But in any case, and then the will is, even if someone says, oh, come on, because I've done this at least 2 times. I've done this actually more than 2 times, where I set out to do something, and I just sort of call them the TV watchers, because I don't watch TV, but sort of the regular folks, right, would be like, oh, come on, that's unrealistic. Oh, be real, that kind of thing. And so if someone were to say that, it's just like my ex saying, do you have a backup plan if this doesn't work after 2 years? God bless him. And I was just like, look, it's my turn to be the exception to the rule. And so it's that level of will and self-assurance, because this is a huge piece. And so I'll tell you what I was doing for the house in Vermont, because I wanted this 1800s farmhouse. I would close my eyes, and in my mind, I would be walking toward the farmhouse, but I wasn't watching myself walk toward it. I was walking toward it. So I'm in this imaginal field, and I see that farmhouse. And then on my right, that's just how it was in the vision, there would be these like river rocks. They're all smooth rocks, but they were partially submerged in the ground. Those were all my fears and doubts. But they were muffled. They were muffled, right? Because they're, partly underground. So they would be saying whatever the fears and doubts say. And I'm looking at that house, and I'm walking toward that house. And I would get to that house, and there'd be a front porch. And I would walk up the steps of the porch, and I would open the door. And then I would be inside my house. And my heart would just, oh my God, I can still feel it. My whole body would be electrified. And I would feel the way I would feel if I just turned the key into a house that I'd envisioned and wanted for so long, and finally it's here, right? So I would do that in my imagination. Now, I like to play with words, and you can be a nation unto yourself. And a magi is a magician, right? Well, imagination is I, magi nation. And what that tells me is each of us individually is a nation of the magi, But again, if you don't know this, everyone has different realities, and so most people aren't even going to realize it, much less they don't even know that's possible. And then a lot of people, if they hear it, think, oh, come on, that's nonsense, right? Now, that's the other thing that she taught me. It was a big deal because I could be worrying and negative, and they would say, that's a command, or they'd say, that's a declaration. So if someone says, oh, magic, that's nonsense, that's a declaration, and so it shall be. That's your spell. Great. But the imagination has been belittled for so long, right? Like so many of us, I was told this when we were children, oh, that's just your imagination, as if the imagination is just some pesky intruder, that you've got to shoo away when it gets too bothersome. And yet this is, I think, like command central for creation, whatever you're trying to create, right? I mean, whether you're an architect or whatever, a designer, an artist, whatever you have, or an inventor, where does that come from? It comes from the power of the imagination. And so I developed a very healthy and strong regard for the power of the imagination. And it, for me, this is my imagination. I'm in charge. So I can kind of do it half-heartedly and hope that it works, or I can really, really work it. It is a tool, and it's a gift, and it's a grace, I think, from the Creator, because we are sons and daughters of the Creator, is how I look at it. And so the apple doesn't fall far. So how are we going to use these gifts that are innate within us? And obviously people have different challenges and whatnot. And so for everyone, it's going to be different. But this is just what I was doing. And then I would just say out loud, yeah, I'm getting an 1800s cottage for sale by owner. And it had to be for sale by owner because my work is, a lot of it's under the table, which I prefer. I'm a big fan of cash. And so I knew no bank was going to give me a mortgage. So that was the other thing too, right? I mean, there were so many, in terms of getting this Vermont house, the one that I bought. Oh my God, everything about it, any sort of average person say, Shonagh, get real. Are you serious? You can't buy it. No one's going to give you a mortgage. And and I thought, well, it's going to be for sale by owner, and I will do this privately with the owner. There'll be no bank involved. So would you like me to quickly tell that story?
Yes, I'd love to hear that story because it just sounds so magical and inspiring. The more inspiration we can get out there to people, the better at the moment, I think.
So I will say also, when you are endeavoring to do this kind of experimentation, exploration work, however you want to think of it, you cannot care what others think or say. Like, you have to be really, I'm an Aries. And so I came in here to be an individual. I had a psychic say, that was the first thing out of her mouth. She said, oh boy, you came here, you're very much an individual. And I am. And I was also bullied horribly in junior high school, and it scarred me. But it also served me well, because it was that huge realization of, look, you don't fit into a peg, so don't try, and just be who you are and do your own exploring. So it really, really freed me in the long run. And so I actually, anyway, so what happened was I had maybe 20,000 saved, and I found this place on Zillow in August of 2018. And okay, I find this place. It's for sale by owner. It's an 1840s farmhouse. It's on 3 acres. It's got a barn in the back. It's 1 hour from the airport. And I'll just tell you the price, because I have full disclosure. I don't care, because it's part of the story. So it was they were selling it for $179,500. $179,500. And I was like, oh my God, this is my house. This is my house. And so I called the owner the next day. Oh my God, you're going to love this story, Claire. I call the owner. And he's the sweetest guy. And we totally hit it off. And so we're talking about this place. And then I said, look, I'm going to be in New York over the weekend. So might there be a possibility that I could come look at this house? And he said, absolutely, sure, of course you can. And this was on this lovely place, island called Isle La Motte in Vermont. I didn't even know they had islands on Vermont, but it's the northernmost island on Lake Champlain. It's 20 minutes from the Canadian border, which is also why it was so affordable. It wasn't really close to much. But in any case, he said to me, he said, the majority of people looking at this house are looking at it as a second home, like a summer home. And I said, not me. I said, this is my forever home, and I'm going to call it Fairy Tree Cottage. Because there's this old Irish saying, woe betide he or she who dares to fell a fairy tree. So I thought, all right, I'm going to call this place Fairy Tree Cottage. So anyway, I said that to him. My daughters would have absolutely died of embarrassment. They'd be like, oh my God, Mom, how could you say that? Anyway, he answers and says, that's funny. My wife and I were just at a fairy conference earlier this summer. And I'm like, wait, what did this man just say? It's not even like I'm talking to the wife, I'm talking to the husband. And that's when I knew. I was like, all right, something's up here. Something's up. And so I flew actually to New York. I was visiting one of my retreat clients who lives there. And so we were driving up to that area. Anyway, she said, let's just drive up and, see the place. And so anyway, so that was our plan. And I saw the house the next day. And of course, it was perfect. And I get home from that whole weekend, and I have a retreat client. And I got home on a Sunday. She arrived on a Monday. And so we're working that week. Of course, I told her, about this place. I'm all excited. She has a real big week. And then she leaves Saturday morning. And Saturday afternoon, I had a phone call with the sellers. And they said, look, in order for us to sell you this house and for you to pay us instead of a bank, we have to pay off the existing mortgage. And then we can hold the note for you. And I was like, okay, what's left? And they said $95,000. And I had 20 grand saved. It was like, okay, I need 75,000 yesterday. And so I hang up with them. Sunday, the following day, I get a call from the retreat client who I worked with the week before. And not a call, it was a text. She texts me and she says, look, I know you're going to say no, but I want you to say yes. I want to support your work. I am lending you $20,000 toward that house. I mean, what? And so, I called her. Oh my God, I was beside myself. And so we worked out this whole thing and, I would pay her monthly, blah, blah, blah. But she said, listen, I know you want to do some work on that too. So don't worry about paying me until you actually move in. So I was going to be moving in a year later because I had to wait for my daughter to graduate high school. Okay, so that happens. 2 days later, because I've told friends about this, my dear friend who was my mushroom partner, he calls and says, look, I don't want you to leave, but I'll lend you 20 grand toward that place. Well, first of all, I did not even know he had that kind of money, to lend out like that. And so that happened. So now I'm up to 60 grand. Well, I talk about this in the book. I was adopted when I was about 4 months old. And in my early 20s, I found my birth mother and my birth father. And I ended up being very close with my birth father. And he left my life for a while because his wife wanted that at the time. Anyway, and then she passed away. And then he got in touch and said, all right, I want to know my granddaughters. I want to know my daughter. And so, we've been very close ever since. But I had a lovely family who raised me. And I did lose my father. And it was interesting because about a year later, my birth father came back into my life. And I thought, my goodness, I lost a father. I've gained a father. But he didn't owe me anything. But of course, I told him about this house. He texts me and says, I'm giving you $20,000 toward that house. I don't know what's up with the 20, but in any case, that was what everyone was offering, 20,000. So of course I call him and I said, all right, oh my God, thank you. And, I have 2 other people who are lending me 20,000. So, I can pay you back in this way that I was going to work. And he said, no, wait, you're misunderstanding. I'm not lending you this money. He told me I put you in my will, which again, he already has children. He doesn't have to do that. But anyway, he said, this is part of your inheritance. And so that was an emotional moment. So now I'm up to 80 grand. And I text the seller and I said, hey guys, I'm up to 80. What if you guys pony up the other 15 and we just call it good and, do our deal? And he wrote back and said, we just got a pile of offers. And I was like, oh. And so I had 2 days of just nail biting, waiting. And then my birth father called and said, he just asked what was up. So I told him what was going on. And he said, we can't let this get away from us. I'll give you the other 15. So in 1 week, Claire, $75,000 came to me for that house. No, I didn't ask anybody for money. This just came to me. And so I bought that house. And then after that, it keeps going. I thought, all right, I need serious renovation to do on this place, and I need a good contractor. And then I thought, well, I'm on a roll here. So, okay, God, fairy, pan, all of my helpers. I want a contractor who's older, experienced, he does excellent work, and he lives on the island, and he's reasonable. And so I call the seller for advice, and they said, oh, you got to work with this guy. He grew up on the island. He does fantastic work. We used him. So I got him. And then I didn't take out any loans for the renovation. And my work got really busy. So I was able to send him a deposit in December. And then he started the work in January of 2019. And I continued every month to receive these poetic transmissions, whether I was on a mushroom journey or not, on coaching me to properly use my mind to hold that vision. Because I was getting nervous in 2019. I was like, oh my God, I'm moving in June and I'm spending a lot of money here on the renovation that has to happen. And I just hope I'm going to have enough money to cover this. And it just all came together in just amazing ways. All right. So then by the time I moved there in June, I drove across country. I had no money left. And right before that, I had just $3,000 to buy a car because I sold my little car on the West Coast. I said, all right, I'm going to do this on Craigslist, sight unseen, find me someone honest. And an honest person sold me their car for $3,000. And then I get to the house and I had given away a lot of my furniture because it had little doorways and stuff. And I thought, I'll get stuff in Vermont. Well, then I got the final bill from my contractor, so that wasn't going to happen. So then this happened. My oldest friend, who I've known since I was 16, calls. She lives in Connecticut. And she said, Shonagh, I was just on a walk with my friend so-and-so, and this woman's very wealthy. And she said that this woman said, who now lives in France, she said, I'm never going to live in the States again. And I've got a temperature-controlled storage unit full of antiques and furnishings. And I just wanted to find a good home. Not, I want to sell this stuff to anyone who wants to. No. I want to give it away. And she said, well, Shonagh just moved to Vermont and she needs furniture because I didn't have a sofa, chairs, carpets. No, I had a dining table and chairs, bedroom stuff. That was it. And so she calls. And a couple days later, I paid $500 to rent a U-Haul to drive 4 hours to upstate to New York to her temperature-controlled storage unit and received beautiful antiques from Provence, France, and the most gorgeous furniture, beautiful Tibetan wool carpets, just all given to me. And when I got back up to the house, then people helped me move everything in. And Claire, it looked like I hired a New York designer who did the most exquisite, perfect, beautiful job. Everything fit in place by design, as if it was by design. I stood in the center of my house with my hands over my heart center, weeping. And I just said, thank you. And I am not clairaudient. And in that moment, the words, "Welcome home," came into my ears. And so I just have to say to people, when you have a vision, again, think of that formula: vision, focus, will. And now, obviously, I don't have a vision of winning the lottery. I'm not talking about something like that, but things can happen in the most strikingly unusual and unexpected ways. And especially when you are working with the spirit world, anything is possible. There's a wonderful, I heard this woman, Frances Scollin, say this. She was talking about God, but it really applies to spirit. It says, "My Father has ways I know not of." And I love that. I love that. And I'm like, yeah, the she have ways I know not of. And they can move mountains. And so that's my story. And then, like I said, I have all of these beautiful poetic transmissions that kept me going, that kept me on track. And for those who don't have that kind of thing, well, you know what? My book can be a very helpful resource for that.
I was so moved hearing that story, Shonagh. So beautiful.
I thought that was my forever home, and I lived there for 3 years, and it was perfect because it was during all the sort of COVID stuff, and I wasn't into that at all. So it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing timing. But I was there. But then I now live in Northern Virginia, and I won't get into that story because I know we've talked, I've gone on and on. But I was invited by a former retreat client to live on this 50-acre alpaca farm. And what happened was that winter of 2021 was bitter cold, and oh my God, and I slipped on the ice, I hit my head, whatever. So I was finally open to maybe that possibility. I mean, I wasn't thinking of it, but she gave me the invite. And so, of course, also, I love Scotland. Scotland is dear, dear, dear to my heart. And I work with a she, and she means mound or hill. So the town where I live is, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's something hill. And also I work with White Owl. And so this woman and I have a very deep connection with the White Owl. And this place was named because it reminded the sort of early people of Scotland. So anyway, I was like, okay, all right, this is meant to be. I got you. So yeah, I'm really, at this point, Claire, I really trust now. Like, if I were to not trust, that would be such a slap in the face. These beautiful beings who have guided me so impeccably. So yeah, life is magic.
So Shonagh, I'd love to have you back on the podcast another time.
Sure.
For people listening who will be inspired hearing these stories and your experiences and about your wonderful work, where can they buy your book, and where and how can they connect with you? And is there anything you've got coming up that people can engage with?
Well, I'm not teaching any courses just yet. I'm putting a couple of courses together, but my website is my name, shonaghhome.com. And on my website, I have a page on sessions, so people can book a session with me, and I do a lot of this kind of mentoring in addition to psychological work. Also, my retreats are there. People can inquire about retreats. And then my books are listed as well, so they can purchase the book through my website. But what it will do is it will take you to my publisher, logossophiabooks.com. And they can certainly order it on Amazon as well, but this is a small publisher, and I love them, and that's where I direct people to. So it supports the publisher as well as myself, of course. So logossophiabooks.com. I'll give you those links, Claire, and so you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. I can put that on my blog and in the description for this episode as well. No, release the episode. Thank you, Shonagh, for your time tonight and your heartfelt sharing. It's been so inspirational and magical speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share in this way. And I'm thrilled to be connected with you. And if I get out to the UK, we definitely, I want to get together with you. This is just a wonderful connection.